think we're on.
I think we are on.
I think we're on.
We're on.
Okay, it's 7:30, so I think we'll begin. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We're calling this evening First Glance, and it's a sneak peek of VCCA's first ever online auction. This auction is our primary fundraising event of the year, and its success is important to our mission to provide time and space to artists to bring forth their finest works. We're very pleased to welcome this evening 3 artists to our VCCA Fellows and who have contributed artwork to the auction. My colleague Sheila Pleasance will introduce Soyeon Bay, Pat Lipsky, and Bill Jacobson. But before we begin, I wanted to take a moment to thank those who have helped us to get to this point. First, the host committee, chaired by Quinn and Scott Grafe and Juan Granados and Will Trinkle. The full committee membership is listed on our website. Thank you all for your support and for helping us to spread the word about the auction. I'd like to thank also the members of the Fellows Council who helped to solicit artwork from Fellows, including Soyeon Bay, Karen Bell, and Christine Hebert, and Christina Chu. You all answered the call and did an amazing job soliciting 50 exciting new pieces from VCCA Fellows. And finally, to the members of the VCCA staff who have worked diligently to turn what was supposed to be an in-person fundraising event into an online auction. And special thanks to Kim Doty, our intrepid Director of Communications, who's gone above and beyond to help us to get to this point. Now, without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to my friend and colleague, Sheila Pleasance at Mount St. Angelo.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm happy to be coming to you live from the newly refurbished living room at Mount St. Angelo here in the Fellows residence. A bright, beautiful space. It's been freshly renovated. And the changes, as you've heard about through our newsletter and other communications, have been great here at VCCA. We've got private bathrooms now. We've got individual controls in the bedrooms and studios for temperature controls, individual heating and air conditioning. And even tonight, they're putting in an outdoor patio, and I hope the noise from that is not going to interrupt this evening. But anyway, I have loved watching Mount St. Angelo come back to life. It's really been breathtaking with rediscovered views. From here, I can see the studio barn, which was not possible in the past because of all the grown-up thickets. And we're anxious to reopen and share these improvements with the hundreds of writers, visual artists, and composers who will come here to work in the studios in the coming year. And we'll be ready to welcome those fellows back in July. The facilities, of course, are very important, and that's been the focus in our year closure. But more important is the space and quiet that the fellows find here in these facilities. The inspiration of living 24/7 with your work, the deep dive, and not being interrupted by the distractions of daily life. And also the camaraderie of the people who are here, the lifelong friendships that are formed, the discussions over dinner. That is very much part of the experience here. So for those of us who are not in residence, we and those who are not fellows benefit from the work that's produced here as it makes its way to museums, galleries, the publishing house, and concert halls. So the work here just reverberates out into the world, and we are thrilled to be a part of that. As Kevin said, we're delighted tonight to welcome Soyeon Bay, Pat Lipsky, and Bill Jacobson, 3 of the many wonderful fellows who have given work to be featured at Long Views, the VCCA's online art auction. We'll begin this evening with Soyeon Bay, who was in residence at VCCA in 1996. You can tell how committed Soyeon is and the impact of that residency by the fact that 25 years later, she has joined our Fellows Council and has thrown herself really whole hog into this art auction and helping it move forward. We're very grateful for that. Soyeon Bay is an American painter living and working in New York. She's the recipient of numerous awards, including the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation Fellowship in Fine Art, New York Foundation for the Arts Fellowship, the Pollock Krasner Foundation Grant, and the National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship. She's been a resident at Montalvo Art Center, the Corporation of Yaddo, at the VCCA, and Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, among many others. Soyeon received a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the Rhode Island School of Design, a Master of Fine Arts from Boston University, and a Master of Theological Studies from Harvard Divinity School, having studied with Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel. Her works have been exhibited worldwide in galleries and museums, including the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco, the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology at Harvard University, Seoul Art Center, Hangara Museum, the Museo Nacional de Visual Artes in Montevideo, Queens Museum, Sotheby's, New York, and Philippe de Pury in Luxembourg. Recently, she's collaborated with Martha Graham Dance Company. She was invited as a guest artist for Graham and Google in 2018, where she drew the dancers in 3D using Google's latest technology. She was also invited as a guest artist in the first of the studio series, Graham Deconstructed, Steps in the Street with Soyeon Bay, 2019. We're pleased to have Soyeon here to talk about her work and the piece she has in the art auction. Thank you, Soyeon.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here and just feel so honored to be in such great company. I'd just like to say that, I've been to many, many artist colonies, but it was at VCCA that I met and made lifelong friends. In person and through the network, I met many very fine artists, writers, and composers, but tonight I'd just like to name 5 women, a generation above me, from whom I learned a great deal, who means so much to me and who I love dearly. And they are Andra Samuelson, Ruth Fields, Judith Shayton, Linda Schrank, and Carol Dine, who passed away a little more than a year ago during the pandemic. So may she rest in peace. So the piece that I'm donating to the auction is from the Persimmons and Birds series. Persimmons and Birds I made while living abroad in Italy. In 2003, we moved to northern Italy, to the city of Bologna. And Bologna is known for the oldest university in the Western Hemisphere, and it is considered the food capital of Italy. It is an incredibly beautiful medieval city. And my husband and I found a very charming place on Via Gherardacci in Zona Santo Stefano. And from my studio terrace, there was an Italian garden. And in the midst of this garden, there was a persimmon tree. And when I think of persimmons, I can't help but think of my early childhood back in Korea, because just about everybody had a persimmon tree. And especially for the fall harvest, Chuseok, we would eat persimmons and all different kinds of persimmons. So I think I identified with this persimmon tree. And you have to remember that I was the only Korean American in all of Boston. So the Bolognese didn't know what to make of me, because here was an Asian woman, an American who spoke perfect English. I was a mom of 2 little ones, an artist, and traveling all over the world to exhibit my work. And they just couldn't get their heads around the idea of me. So, as many of you know who have been to Italy, vacationing in Italy is not exactly the same as living there day to day. And especially during Berlusconi Italy, there were some challenging times for a woman, and especially for a foreign woman. So one day I'm looking out my terrace, and there is a swarm of blackbirds pouring down from the sky, and they start to devour the kaki, the fruit, the persimmons, but with such vengeance that the tree is shaking. And I had never witnessed such a phenomenon. So I started to write about it, and I started to paint about it. And I made paintings such as The Attack, Dormant Wings, another one called Dubale, um, and Fledgling, Winter, and Bone, and of course the one that I'm donating to the auction. So it's with this body of work that I won the Guggenheim Fellowship in Fine Art in 2007. And that was the greatest affirmation for me as an artist at that time, and a complete validation of the hard work I put in 24/7, raising two little ones on foreign soil. I mean, if you could imagine a newborn attached to my breast and a toddler tugging, at my waist, that was me. And trying to find a moment to put down a layer, another layer around the clock like this. And also, it was that year that I was invited by Seoul Art Center, Hangara Museum, to exhibit this body of work. And while I was being interviewed, I had a revelation. While describing the process, they asked me why the fruit was green, why it was metallic green. And I realized that I did that because it was my attempt to shield the fruit, because my instinct was to protect the fruit. And so for this reason, whenever I think of my Persimmons and Birds series, I always think about self-preservation and my search for human dignity. So that's it.
Thank you, Soyeon. That's wonderful to hear part of the genesis of that piece. That is really, really wonderful. And everyone will have an opportunity to bid on this piece and support the VCCA at the same time. It's really a great way to participate in the creative process yourself. So thank you, Soyeon.
Thank you.
Next up tonight, we have Pat Lipsky. Pat was in residence at VCCA twice, in 1986 when VCCA was just 7 years old, and then again in 1993. Pat is an American artist who represents lyrical abstraction and color field theory. Her paintings are like true color worlds. Lipsky is also known as the author of several essays and articles on the art world in which she explores the concerns of being a female artist. She was born in 1941 in New York City and studied art at the Brooklyn Museum Art School and received her Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from Cornell University. She also took classes at the Art Students League in New York and received her MFA from Hunter College's Graduate School of Painting. Pat received grants from the Pollock Krasner Foundation, among many others, and she's the recipient of the Purchase Prize from the American Academy and Institute of Arts and Letters. Her paintings are in the collections of the Whitney Museum, the Smithsonian's Hirshhorn Museum, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, the Walker Art Center, the Brooklyn Museum, and Harvard's Fogg Art Museum, among many others. We're thrilled to have Pat with us tonight, and thank you, Pat, for talking about your work.
You're welcome. I'm delighted to be here and delighted to give back to the VCCA. When I went to the VCCA in 1993, I also made one friend who has been a friend of mine ever since. He was a composer. Up until that time, I had never met anyone, who was around all the time, who was a composer. So it was a whole new world to me. And I think one of the wonderful things about the VCCA was that it had composers in residence. Now, can you show the first slide while I'm talking? Thank you so much. So Ted came to my studio. The studios were wonderful. The ambiance was spectacular. And I was doing a Black series of paintings. And I was working very closely with a friend and mentor, Clement Greenberg, at the same time. He was behind these what are called close value color paintings. So Ted saw this painting, which I titled Virginia at the end of the summer. And he loved the painting. And he said to me, I'd like to compose a series of percussion pieces around your painting. So this was a wonderful opportunity to work with a composer, which could never have happened had I not been at the VCCA. And now can you go to the second image, please? So at the same time, this is 1993, this was a painting I had done in New York. This is the last painting of mine that Clement Greenberg saw before his death in 1994. And it's called Dark Love, as you can see. It's an askew grid with very close value black paintings. Unlike Ad Reinhardt, I wanted to create texture and surface within the concept of black. This was one of the three paintings that Ted Whipwreath wrote his percussion compositions for. Can we see the second one, please? The second painting in the series was called History, and you can see the underlines, which are the past, and then the top grid, which is the present. So this was the second painting in the percussion series that Ted wrote for percussion. And then the third is called In Memoriam CG. This took a little longer. This is a very long period of time for me to work on one painting. And this was my homage to Clement Greenberg. And then the whole series was shown at the Kitchen in Chelsea as a performance with the paintings on the stage. So none of this would have happened without the extraordinary opportunity of being at the VCCA in 1993. And I believe that's the kind of, event that can happen in a wonderful environment where people are mixing. I thought what Bay said was interesting was that I had maybe gone to one other artist colony. There was something special about the, you could say, vibe at VCCA, which allowed people to feel comfortable and have a good time with each other. Now, the painting that I am, donating is from a different period, 2004. It's a monoprint, which means that there is only one image of it. And it was done in San Francisco. I was invited for a 2.5-week stay at a print shop called Ouroboros Press. And it's similar in a way. It's later than the Black series, but it's similar in a way in the sense that it's close value colors, except in this case, there are 3 different areas of close value color. So every red is a different red. All of the whites are completely different. And then there's that one black, which is sort of my tipping my hat to the Black series that I finished in the late 90s. And that's pretty much what I wanted to say. And I'm delighted to have this opportunity to talk about how great I thought the VCCA was and is. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pat. I think that's great. And it's so wonderful to again hear the story behind the work, and also to highlight that the cross-disciplinary things that happen here, that a lot of people, when they think about an artist community, they think about an artist alone in a studio, but actually there's a lot of feeding of that work. There's a lot of real amazing cross-pollination that happens among the different genre. And a number of artist communities are single genre focused, and we have writers, composers, and visual artists, and all sorts of wonderful things happen. That your interaction with the composer is just really one of the wonderful things that can happen. And there was a video that was done of the composition, the percussive composition that was done to those pieces, and the link to that video, which is available on YouTube, will be put in the comments so that everyone can go and see that, the result of that collaboration.
Thank you so much.
Pat, so much for donating the piece to support VCCA and for those wonderful words about your time here.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Our third artist this evening is Bill Jacobson. Bill has visited both of the VCCA residency programs. He was in residence here at Mount St. Angelo in 2018, and then at VCCA's Moulin à Neuf in Auvillard, France in 2019. And I remember very clearly that summer that he was here. It was the first summer that the Amherst County Fair came down the street. And I remember seeing him in the field with his big camera working on that as we were taking the fellows down the road to the Amherst County Fair. So it's wonderful to have you here. Wonderful that you've experienced the VCCA in both of its locations. So Bill Jacobson was born in 1955 in Norwich, Connecticut, and has been making photographs for nearly 50 years. Though his methods have varied considerably, the work is joined by underlying concerns with memory, perception, and the subtle dialogue between absence and presence. Prior to moving to New York in 1982, he received a BA from Brown University and an MFA from San Francisco Art Institute. He's exhibited widely in the US and Europe and is in the collections of the Guggenheim Museum, the Whitney Museum, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Museum of Fine Arts at Houston, the Brooklyn Museum, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and the Victoria and Albert Museum, among many others. Jacobson has received fellowships from the Pollock Krasner Foundation, the John Simon Guggenheim Foundation, the Aaron Siskin Foundation, and the New York Foundation for the Arts. In addition to residencies at VCCA and VCCA France, he has had 7 residencies at the MacDowell Colony and has also been to Yaddo, Civitella Ranieri Foundation, Boviasco Foundation, the Blue Mountain Center, and Edward Albee Foundation. Between 2008 and 2018, he taught in the ICP Bard MFA program. 7 monographs have been published of Jacobson's work, and a new book, which will include work from both VCCA residencies, will be published next year. We're thrilled to have Bill with us. Thank you, Bill, for talking about your work.
Happy to do it. Hello, everybody. I spent part of the afternoon reading writings by one of my favorite artists, Agnes Martin. And I found one quote that I just want to take a moment and read because it really relates to how special VCCA is. Anyways, Agnes writes, "In order to make work, an artist must have a studio, both as a retreat and as a place to really focus and concentrate. In the studio, an artist must have no interruptions from himself or anyone else. Interruptions are disasters. To hold on to the, in quotes, silver cord, that is the artistic discipline. The artist's own mind will be all the help they need." And I read that today and I just thought that's how special VCCA is. It's really a place to be and make work without interruptions. And both residencies were so special for me, just to make discoveries and to learn things. And a lot of the work I was doing both times related to the landscape. And you know, landscape in Virginia was extraordinary and nothing I had ever experienced. And it was very similar actually in the south of France. And so I'm just very grateful for the experience, for the time, and to quote Agnes Martin, to have that period of uninterrupted time and space to make work. So that was great. I'm going to talk about the work that I donated to the auction, which is from 2000, but I'm actually going to start a little bit earlier. If we can see the first slide. When I got out of graduate school in '82, I spent 7 years where actually I didn't make my own work at all. A lot of it was spent going to flea markets, thrift stores, antique stores, and I just was questioning photography. I was questioning what it means to make a photograph. And where I was finding meaning in that time wasn't in my own work, but it was really in these flea market pictures I was finding and discovering. So we can move on to the next. You know, all of them were these moments in time. You know, the writer Roland Barthes talks about every photograph as essentially being a record of a dead moment, because that moment will never exist anymore. They're frozen moments. And the pictures I was finding, you know, all the people had to have been deceased by the time I was making the discovery, but I was holding a little bit of their life in their hands. And it was very fragile and special, and it affected my dream life, and it affected my feelings about photography. And all I could do was really buy and collect in those years. And then finally, about 7 years later, I finally picked up a camera. Okay, we can move on to the next. And I realized that if I put the lens out of focus, and if I left the environs of New York and started traveling by car throughout New England, this was in Pennsylvania in the Amish community, I could actually find and make discoveries that felt akin to the specialness that I had discovered in all those vintage photographs that I had bought by the thousands in the preceding 7 years. We can move on to the next. So that one I just showed you of the guy with the wheelbarrow and the dogs, that was from 1989. In 1992, I started a new series called the Interim Portraits. And at that point, the AIDS epidemic had been with us for, almost a decade. And I wanted to do a body of work that sort of combined the fragility of the figures and the sense of memoriam that I had found in those old photographs with pictures of people, in my community. And, these were misinterpreted at the time as portraits of people with AIDS, which is really not what the work is, but it was really for me an emotional response and a kind of thoughtful response as to what it was like to be in a community where people were dying, with great regularity. And that idea of people being in the world for a period, the title Interim Portraits was important because interim really refers to something and somebody that's there for a brief time. So this is from 92, and it's a series, as I said, called Interim Portraits. We can move on. And then subsequent to that, I did a series called Interim Couples, where I really asked people who were in long-term relationships to come and pose in the studio. Next. And then this is from a subsequent series from 95 and 96 called The Songs of Sentient Beings. Next one. And my interests, over the years have been dual. It's really been the figure and landscape. So I was at Blue Mountain Center in 93 and made a series of negatives of the water. I didn't print them until 96. So actually I credit this picture from 96 because this printing of the very light printing I did and the very dark printing I did really had a dialogue. And then in between were those very gray interim couple pieces. So there's a kind of tonal range that happened in those years from light to dark. And a lot of that was metaphoric and thinking again about what the possibilities of photography were and could be. We can go on to the next. So this is the piece that I'm donating to the auction. In 99, I did a 5-week trip to India and traveled all over. And while these are not from there, they're very clearly from New York. It's actually Tiffany's on the right, and it's very close to the Empire State Building on the left. The time in India made me think about color in ways that I hadn't prior. There was something very much about the movement of people through the cities and through the villages in India that really affected my dream life and my sense of memory and what it means to travel through a world that's different from your own and have experiences that are so transitory and so ephemeral. None of these people were posing for me. It was all people that were just passing by. So these moments could never be recreated. And even though I'm taking them and they're very much about a specific time and place, there also could be any place because of the diffusion and the out of focus. And this was a diptych that was published by Edition Shellman. It was a group here in New York, and they worked with a number of good artists doing this whole thing called about diptychs, about pairs. So this was the edition that we had done together back in around 2004. So I'm going to just show a few more of more recent work that came after. I had a bit of a catharsis in 2005, and I had to move from my loft where I had been living for 20 years. And this isn't my loft. It was actually in an artist studio that I photographed in London. I started thinking about object, and I started thinking about space and about collection. And it's the first in focus picture I did for myself, honestly, in 15 years. And it was really a kind of, again, a transition and thinking about the world in a different way as a collection of objects. We can move on. And then what the working in the studios taught me was about horizon line, was about edge. And I wanted to start working in nature again. So actually I started doing some trips to the desert and started thinking about that horizon line in the desert landscape. And these are called Some Plains, and these are from 2007, 2008. All right, we can go on. And then this led to the Place series, which was basically a series of photographs of rectangles. Some were in studio space and some were in nature. But again, it's that thinking about object and about edge and about placement that has really been sort of paramount to a lot of my thinking in around 2008 and through 2012. Okay, next. And then this is from an odd series. When the Whitney vacated its premises in 2015, I was allowed access to the building for 3 days. And it was like photographing every show that had ever been at the Whitney in a way. It was very moving to be in this empty space. It was like going back to a house that you had grown up in, where everybody had completely moved out and you had the run of it to yourself. And so I got to experience and explore that. So this was its own project called 945 Madison Avenue, but it came out of the Play series. And I like it as a kind of link to some other things that came before and came after. Okay, next. And then I was at MacDowell Colony, 2016. And I started thinking again about the human figure. And so these were all, it's called Figure Ground. And they were all basically people looking at the landscape where the figure is very sharp and in focus. And then the landscape is very diffuse and receding. Next. And then now this is one of the pieces I did at VCCA. And so I took that idea of the figure in the landscape. And luckily there were a number of very wonderful fellows who agreed to come out after dinner and walk around and be my subjects for these pictures. And I had the idea to put them all out of focus. And in a way, it's a return to what I had done many years before. But for me, it also is about continuing that dialogue that's been in all aspects of my work about how the mind perceives and how the camera records and how the eye sees. And it's the juncture of those three that really have tied everything together for me over these last 30 some odd years of making pictures. Okay, there's two more. And this also is from Virginia. And just the beautiful sort of overgrown landscape that I discovered there that I had never seen anywhere else really became the subject and the inspiration for this series. And I also came up with a title for it while I was there called When is a Place? And I think, yeah, it just sort of felt like what I was experiencing and feeling while I was there. I think we've got one or two more. And then this is from the time in the south of France at VCCA. And also there it was about discovering a landscape that was very different from anything I had seen before. And I think that's it. That in a brief kind of nutshell sums up 30 years of making pictures. So thank you for watching. And I hope everybody does some good bidding at the benefit auction.
Thank you so much, Bill. It's wonderful to see the progression of your work over the years, and especially to see those familiar landscapes and just that sense of the progression and of your work going forward. It's wonderful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So I want to thank very much our three artists, Soyeon Bay, Pat Lipsky, and Bill Jacobson. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us this evening. And I look forward to welcoming all of you back to VCCA at some point in the near future when you can see all these renovations for yourself and have the time to dive deeper in your work, from which we will all benefit. I wanted to remind everyone that this event was recorded and can be viewed on YouTube and Facebook, and the link will be on the VCCA's Facebook page and will be on the VCCA website and in our upcoming newsletter. So I encourage you to disseminate it so people can get a sense of the work done by these amazing artists and the caliber of artists that is welcomed and nurtured here at VCCA. I also encourage all of you to participate in this art auction coming up. There are over 120 wonderful pieces to peruse. You can purchase a preview ticket on the link that's in the comments. The preview opens on May 2nd for ticket holders to begin bidding. Note that there will be a buy now option. The auction opens free to the general public on May 7th. And I encourage everyone to join us at the Last Look closing party on May 15th, which will be at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. It'll be a time to celebrate all the artists who've donated work, all those who've purchased work, and all those who work to keep VCCA going. A big task that we've got a lot of shoulders to the wheel on that. Again, we thank the host committee that worked for the auction, and also the Intrepid committee from the Fellows Council who took on this project: Chris Hebert, Soyeon Bay, Karen Bell, and Christina Chu. And many thanks, as Kevin said, to the VCCA staff, especially Kim Doty, who's behind the scenes, but who's worked incredibly hard on this auction and who's handling the tech details tonight. Thank you, Kim. She's also put together a quick video of all the pieces in the art auction, so you can see that. And again, thank you everyone for your support, and we can't wait to welcome you to this beautiful space. Thank you. and good night.